Persuasive speaking is a necessary part of a civil society. Aristotle called this rhetoric, or all available means of persuasion. He identified 4 social values of rhetoric. 1. Rhetoric can keep fraud and injustice in check. Rhetoric informs and instructs the public. Rhetoric helps the audience to understand multiple sides of an issue. And finally, rhetoric provides a means of verbal defense. Aristotle also classified 3 means of persuasion: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the credibility of a speaker. It is important to remember that this credibility lies in the minds of the audience, not in the words of the speaker. The speaker can develop credibility by showing common sense and goodwill toward the audience. Orally citing your sources so the audience can find information for themselves is one way to be trustworthy and be perceived as a person whom the listeners can believe. You must cite the words, facts, and phrases from other sources in your speech. If you're going to use a direct quote, you must do so accurately and respect the original author's standpoint and context in which the quote was utilized. Charisma and dynamism is another way to develop ethos. Being perceived as engaging and liking the audience will increase the likelihood that the audience will like you. And there's 3 types of credibility. Initial credibility, that's the first impression. Second is derived credibility, the impression you develop as you speak. And finally, terminal credibility, the impression the audience has of you after you finish speaking. Logos is the logical appeal, both in format and in rationale. That supports the message. Logos is based on knowledge and reasoning. Always support your knowledge with evidence such as facts, examples, opinions, and statistics. Speakers may find it helpful to develop their speech purpose by using proposition statements. Proposition of fact, is something true or false? Proposition of value, the morality of a situation, or proposition of policy, which is advocating for an action. Your book outlines types of reasonings as inductive, deductive, analogy, and causal. Finally, the way in which you organize your speech can tell the audience much about your logic when approaching your subject matter. You may find cause and effect, or problem and solution as effective ways of organizing your speech. Your book highlights other organizational strategies, such as refutation and motivated sequence. Finally, you want to avoid faulty reasoning or fallacies. A fallacy is an attempt to persuade an audience without adequate knowledge or with arguments that are redirected toward the person and away from the topic at hand. Understanding these fallacies, carefully described in your book, will not only help you as a speaker, but can improve your ability to discern persuasive arguments of others. The third means of persuasion, according to Aristotle, is pathos. Pathos is emotional appeal through love, hate, sympathy, guilt, or fear. And like ethos, this emotion resides in the mind of the audience, not in the action of the speaker. Earlier this semester, we saw an example of a speech with extreme emotion. And when you overdo emotion, it will erode your entire speech. So you want to be emotionally ethical. Vivid language, concrete examples, and stories can all increase your emotional appeal. You may find that appealing to a combination of emotions may be the most successful approach. As you prepare your speech, you will want to consider the types of motivators you will use during your presentation. Positive motivation tells the audience what good will happen if they follow your advice. Negative motivation tells the audience that something bad will happen to their health, to their family, to their future. Negative motivation often taps into fears. Finally, cognitive dissonance creates an uneasy feeling internally for audience members. Cognitive dissonance points out that their behavior is in conflict with their values. So if, for example, we are trying to persuade adults to come back to school, we can point out that it may be difficult to convince our children to earn a degree when we ourselves have not. Your book explains that appealing to the needs of the audience is the best way to motivate an audience. Consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The most basic needs are physiological in nature, the need for food, air, sleep, for example. Next is safety, and not only safety for ourselves, but also for those who we love. The next, more complex need are social needs. These are the needs to be loved and valued, to belong to a group. Self-esteem needs address our desire to think well of ourselves. And finally, the need of self-actualization is to be the very best one can be. Each level can only be achieved, according to Maslow, if the need below is satisfied. We can't, for example, appeal to an audience's social needs, such as maybe going to school, if they don't feel safe in their own homes.